examples of successful minority recruitment. And we can go to the panel, but I did have a couple of folks that said that they would like to give an example of recruitment. And so I'm going to call on Christine first, and then Tom, I'll have you in waiting here if you'll be willing to speak to the group. So Christine, let's try our technology and see if you can speak with us. Christine?
I think I can. Can you hear me?
We got you on the line. Thanks, Christine.
Great. Well, I am involved in the DEI effort at the state level for Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development. And we had been having discussions about how we shepherd minority populations into conservation and agriculture. And right after we had this conversation, I happened to be sitting in on Conservation District forester interviews, and this wonderful young woman interviewed who recently had finished a master's degree. You could tell that she was had a lot to offer, but her interview skills were not good, and we didn't select her. But I made sure to tell the district manager that I would be willing to coach her on her interview skills. And it just came to dawn on me that this is, a great way to shepherd people into conservation. And so she called me within 24 hours because she had a interview the next day, and we talked through how she could improve her skills. And then not too long after that, I did find out she did get the position. It was not with districts or any state agencies, but it was a forester position. And it just, to me, sometimes we need these small efforts to help people make that leap into our work. So
thanks, Christine. That's an excellent example of getting our a female population into those works. But I want to hear from the panelists, maybe if you had similar experience where that extra help, like what Christine just mentioned, really made a difference. Ebony, you want to go first? Ebony Weber.
Sure, I think that was a great example, and I think it is those type of one-to-one efforts sometimes that make the greatest impact. I know Ebony Preston also touched on it as well in terms of what they do to prepare students and individuals, and sometimes it is that extra coaching or the extra support to kind of lessen that learning curve of individuals who may be coming in with diverse experiences and helping them to see how their experiences fit into the roles. I love what Ebony Preston said about debunking or demystifying like the job description and making sure that your skills speak to what the job is actually asking for. So those are great examples, and that mentorship and support actually is what those individuals need to really get into the space.
That extra little help, huh, Ebony? Just the, making sure that they got what they need. They got a place to talk to, somebody to get coached from. Excellent. Ebony P, I want to make sure that you've got an opportunity too. Ebony Weber mentioned you. Want to weigh in on this little extra help here that Christine mentioned with an example?
Well, I was going to say the beauty of being one of the last people to answer a question is that all the good stuff's already said. So no, I think you all are spot on there, and just you'd be surprised what a little effort will get you. And just kind of making sure that you're creating the space. So we've talked about the programming, we've talked about the examples. I think just from all the presenters, you kind of get that, but making sure that you're doing it and doing it in the right way, I think makes the biggest difference. But I would just echo what others have said.
People that are wanting to get into these positions for minority and so forth, and places that we've not been before, need to be able to see themselves in that seat. Some of you have talked about that. Would either one of you like to speak to that, or Kim, or any of our panelists?
Well, I definitely believe I always use that quote some kind of way within my talks is it's hard to be what you haven't seen before, you know, you can aspire to be. And so representation matters. And that's why I definitely stress representation at all levels of the organization matters, because if they only see women make it to a certain level of the organization, or only see people of color, you know, top off at a certain level of the organization, it speaks, what does long-term growth look like here? Or maybe I've hit the, you know, virtual glass ceiling that I can't move beyond this point. And so I think as organizations, how do we get, you know, how do we move beyond that? I was really happy to see NRCS, you know, appointed their first African-American chief of the agency. And so that representation matters, because there's a whole group of individuals that are currently in state and leadership roles that now see that they can now make it to the next threshold, and that may have given them 10 more years of you know, iron just to kind of get through it. But it is those short successes that I think really matters.
Well, thanks so much, Christine. Thanks so much for chiming in and giving us an example. I had one other volunteer, and I don't know if they was voluntold or volunteered, Kim, but you know, Tom Salzer's joining us today. And Tom, let's see if the technology will work and have you speak to the group. Either example or just some personal thoughts regarding successful minority recruitment, please.
All right. Good morning, Ray. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Loud and
How
clear.
in the world do I turn my camera on? Oh, well. Good morning, one and all. The example I have is really just the very beginnings of an example. We're just scratching the surface. For several years, Washington State, through the Conservation Commission and the Washington Association of Conservation Districts, has had a Tribal Relations Committee. And while that really is WACD's thing, I include the commission because they're such a close, dear partner to us, very critical in our success. And the Tribal Relations Committee is really trying to bridge that invisible gap that is so wide between independent sovereign Indian nations and local conservation districts. And it's a huge challenge because we have communication difficulties from a sovereign nation level down to a small, tiny unknown local government, you know, that gap. But then there's also the gap of the communities we have traditionally served versus our Native American customers, who are traditionally have been less well served historically. And so I don't have success to report other than we continue to work on it. That's our most active committee, statewide committee with WACD, and we're continuing to build relationships. It takes so much time to invest to meet them where they are. We've got to go to them because we can't expect them to come to us, and simply to be there persistently, consistently for them when they're ready, and then we will be there. So that's not a successful story. It's a successful, what we believe will be a successful process, but it just takes so much time to break those barriers that have been established for what seems like eons. Thank you, Ray.
We take first steps on a major journey, Tom. Thank you for sharing that. And another part of the efforts that are ongoing. Could I get some panelists' reaction to that? Just unmute. Kim, Ebony, anything that you'd like to say? Kim, go ahead, please.
Well, it's easy to echo Tom's comments because Tom is one of our treasured members of our DEI Special Committee. So I've had an opportunity to listen and learn from Tom quite a bit over this last, 10 or so months. And you know, like I mentioned earlier, it's starting that conversation, you know, where, and part of the journey is is learning from others and learning their perspectives. And how do you do that? You know, I think a lot of self-reflection is needed. You know, we do things the way we do them because we've always done them that way. Well, you know, is that right? Certainly we can honor, you know, how we've always done things, but at the same time recognize that we could do better. You know, we must do better. And having that, you know, as Tom said, just scratch the surface. You know, scratch the surface of how do you get started in with the conversation with different groups. You know, are you uncomfortable, you know, going to a different location to meet with people? You know, is it a church that you're not a member of? You know, if that's where a community group meets, bring a friend. Or is your uncomfort just a temporary, you know, thing and that you need to get past? Because once again, you start that conversation. Now you've opened a window and an opportunity to other people that they did not know that existed for them. You know, some people will guard their local board. You know, the board must be the way it's always been. You know, for example, you know, producers. We can only have producers on our board. That's what, and for some, that's what their enabling legislation is. For others, it's just because they're asking the same people. At my board level, probably the most dynamic board member that I've ever had the privilege of sitting with on my county board was somebody who had zero connection to agriculture in the financial, you know, sense. He was an attorney, but had so much perspective because they asked questions, and they made us, the rest of the board, go, why are we doing that? And it just made you question, you know, that there's an opportunity to do something differently, because somebody, just from a point of knowledge, they just wanted to know, well, you know, and if you can't explain why you do something or how you do something, then perhaps that's your opportunity to say there's room for improvement here.
Thanks, Kim. And Ebony, please. Ebony Weber.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with Kim's comments. I think one of the great things about manners, one of the things that I sometimes has me pulling my hair out, but one of the great things on, as Kim said early, pressure build, you know, makes a diamond, is that our board consists of students and professionals. It consists of individuals from government, industry, and academia. And for us, it's having all of those stakeholders at the table and being able to think through the best solution and with the most perspective. So you're making solutions with the most perspective that you can have. I love what you said. If you're looking around the room and you're making decisions for communities or for groups of people that are not present, that should be enough to give you pause to say, well, hold up, who are we missing? I think that's something, as we talk about the I in inclusion, what I can do is, you can, as an individual, can look around the room and see who's not there. You may not be able to necessarily change the policies, but you can definitely speak up and voice concern to be able to see, you know, to get more perspective in the room. And even in the sense, I love this, because this has what other groups have implemented, where they're sometimes restricted by their own bylaws, is creating those non-voting positions or those advisory councils where individuals can sit in, be a part of, and still you can get that perspective without having to sometimes go through an act of Congress to kind of change to allow for those voices to be, you know, legitimately on the board. But I think looking at our policies, examining why we do the things that we do, and then know that sometimes what you find you might not like what you find. And so I think in those essences, it's okay to change. Be okay with, if you don't like what you see, please have the courage to change it. Because that's where you probably find that you've had a lot of disparities. And I'll just end with this. It is a marathon. It is not a race. And so do not get discouraged about the amount of time it's going to take to build relationships, and make sure you build in projects where you can see success along the way. And so success may be just getting some new individuals to the meeting. And for this week, that's enough, and be able to celebrate that versus trying to boil the ocean in one go round. I think that's one way to get burnt out, overwhelmed, and definitely discouraged.
Thank you, Ebony. I'm just going to encourage everybody, if you've got an example of outstanding recruitment that's been done, or maybe the meeting that you went to encourage, people to participate in the conservation district or conservation leadership positions, please raise your hand and we'll call on you to do that. I'm struck, folks, panelists, each of you have pressed us to go to a different audience, a different place. So here's what I want everybody on the webinar to do right now. I want you to grab a piece of paper. I want you to grab something to write with, and I want you to write down the one organization or group that you believe that we need to go and talk to. And you're personally going to go talk with them. So I've got ambassadors there. I've got people. So grab that paper, grab that pencil or something to write with, write down that one group or individual that that we need to go talk with to encourage them to be a part of our organizations. Now, hey, panelists, there's some weirdness about that, right? It's like, okay, here you got this guy. I'm just going to take this guy, right? You got this short little bald headed white guy, right? And old to boot, right? So I'm like the worst of all of it. And so how weird would it be for me to go to an organization that I just wrote down? You got any tips for how we get started with that? Get started, because I'm maybe fearful, right? Of taking that extra step and going to a place I've never been to, with people I don't know, with, things I don't know, a culture I don't know. How do I get to that first step? How do I get that entree even, right? That invitation or that, opportunity.
Well, Ray, one, I will say this, candidly speaking, that's what it feels like to be a minority. And so if you're I think that's a great example of what it feels like when those individuals are coming into your spaces as I don't know what to say. I don't know how I'm going to take. I don't understand this culture. What if they don't understand my perspective? And I think all of those same fears, I love that you started with that. It's that empathizing to know what it feels like to walk into that space. And for most individuals, if you're walking in and you're well-intentioned and you're coming with opportunities, people are going to listen. I think, again, it takes time to speak to them in the way that they like to speak to. So you can't go with your talking points and gonna say what you want, and then also are gonna dictate how the other person is gonna receive it. So I think we have to go in being able to share our perspective, but also listen and ask the questions as well. Go there seeking to learn to what do you need? Because I think there's the assumption that you're going with opportunities that you think will be best for them, without asking the question, what is best for you, or what do you need? So I think it's one, understanding what they see as opportunities, because what you may see as an opportunity, I might not necessarily see it that way. So I think it's one, not going in with the assumption that you're going to give them something that they can benefit from without asking them the question, can they benefit from this?
Bravo. So it might not be a presentation necessarily, but if you're going to do something like that, you better best ask them, hey, what would be opportunities you see? And you hope somebody in the room is brave enough to talk with the person that's in their spot. Right?
From my opinion, and definitely others, please chime in, but just working with minority communities, there is not, most individuals aren't shy to talk about what their needs are. Yeah. And what they would like, what type of support that they need to be successful in their community. So I think if you ask the question, you will probably be surprised at how much you will receive, because that hasn't necessarily been the approach that's always been taken. And so there's a lot of pent up of let me tell you what I need. And so I think sometimes that passion may come off as aggression or frustration, but I think it's just kind of to know that it's really pent up passion, and we're appreciative that the question was asked and my opinion was sought after, versus you, Ray, came to me and say, Ebony, let me tell you about this great opportunity that's going to change your life. And I'm like, well, hold up, Ray, I already have a great opportunity in mind that's going to change my life. So perspective is everything.
So as a guest to a meeting, you ask the question then, what are the needs you folks see, right? And then you could respond to those needs rather than a more formal presentation that just said, here's what it is. I had an elder in an Apache tribe tell me one time when I finished with them on a planning session, she said, you're different. And I said, well, thank you, I think. And I was just with the tribal members, right? And the elder said, you're different. You asked us what we thought. You encouraged us to think and write in our language. You encouraged us to write about the future of our place, of Mother Earth and the way we wanted it. That's so different than others that have came to us. Thank you, she said. And I've put that in my heart, and I remember that, right? And when I was in American Samoa or Saipan or Rhoda or Chuuk Island, and reminded I was the only one of me in the room, but they were the locals, right? They're the ones that knew their needs and thoughts. Ebony, thanks so much. Other panelists that want to add to that, how do we overcome, that's my term, the weirdness, right? Of being somewhere you're uncomfortable.
I'll just quickly say, and I couldn't agree with Ebony more. Maybe it's the name, but just to say, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Right? There took a lot of work, some by design, to get us to where we are. So it's going to take the same amount, if not more, work to undo a lot of this stuff. But intentionality and authenticity and humility are really, really important in this work. So showing up to those spaces, and also know that on the receiving end, if those things aren't showing up, people know that they aren't showing up. And so just being there, being open, as Ebony said, sometimes don't come with the agenda. Sometimes literally just come with a notepad and a pen and being ready to write. And that could be the success for the meeting. And then literally another meeting has to be scheduled. And guess what? The same thing happens again. So those things do happen, but I would say just be open to it and know that there's opportunity, but it's going to take consistency. It's going to take that authenticity. And we just got to do it collectively.
I remember that someone said something in their native language in one of the Pacific Island areas I worked in. And I asked somebody at the break, what did they say? He said, well, they just called you a stupid Haole guy. I said, oh, okay, well, my place, right? And I didn't want to be that, but I was what I was in a community that needed things, right? And they knew what they needed. And by the end of the meeting, I turned from a stupid Haole guy to an okay guy. I thought that was a big step, right? So it's good. Kim, did you have any thoughts on the train of thought, the string of conversation we're having here?
Well, I'd just like to call everyone's attention to Tom's comment here in the chat. Again, I've had the privilege of, well, it was weekly conversations and now monthly, and Tom can always put a bow on what a lot of us are thinking. Yeah, if not you, then who? That Ebony, Preston, you talk about authenticity and being an authentic person, going to have the conversation, to learn, to understand that, while you may have a lot of life experience, you haven't walked in somebody else's shoes. There's a lot of issues that, I hear come over the news and go, I'm not really sure what I think about that. And I'm slowly learning to don't be reactive, don't be reactive to somebody else's opinion on something, because it is just that, it's their opinion and it's their experience that forms that opinion. And so until we understand other people's perspectives, and again, truly welcome them at our table, I don't want to just have a seat at the table. I want to have the same voice at the table that the person next to me does, and that the person across from me has the same appreciation for the perspective, that they bring. And don't set a different table for other people, and put them all, you all need to be at that same proverbial table, not, okay, we're going to create opportunities for everybody, but we're still not bringing everybody together. Who's going to start? Who's going to start the conversation? And it's uncomfortable, but Tom, you did it for me again. You summed it up perfectly. If it's not going to be you, then who's going to do it?
If it's not going to be. So in keeping with that, all of you that are on the webinar today, you wrote down an entity or an individual you're going to go meet with. Now go ahead and type it in the chat. Be bold enough to take on what Tom just asked. If not you, then who? So type in the chat the organization or that individual you're going to go speak with to encourage our successful minority recruitment, or even have a conversation, or like Ebony said, go find out the needs, right? And then and then figure out how we can best do that. So I want to see the chat light up right now with your one example of who you're going to go meet with. So thanks. Washington Latino Farmers Network showed up, the local and SACNAS chapter, and somebody can help me with that acronym. But Chris, thanks. Go ahead, light up our chat with who you're going to go talk with, who you're going to go see, who you're going to get to know. Virginia State University, Sarah Van Arsdale, you're going to go speak with. Thanks, Christine. More, talk to me, talk to us. Write these in the chat. Do that now, as our good police officers would say. Do it now. Write down that in the chat. Okay. So Mike gets to start us with the first question out of the hat. Mike Brown, please, while folks are writing in who they're going to go talk with and start our recruitment processes.
Thanks, Ray, and presenters, thanks for granting me just a minute to make a couple of comments and ask a question of you. First thing I want to say is Christine's comment about interview skills I thought was tremendously important. And I'm a guy who's conducted hundreds and hundreds of job interviews over many years. And sometimes it doesn't matter what skills a person has. If they can't sell it in 30 minutes or 45 minutes, they're not successful in getting that position. So I think that's a key skill that we need to help young folks with. The other thing I wanted to say is I've talked to a number of state cons around the country in a lot of different states, and we've talked about recruitment, and they recruit, they work with the local universities and that sort of thing. But when it comes down to getting an interview list, they receive a list, and this is in the current day and time, they receive that interview list from a centralized location. And many times those people that they've recruited to bring into their workforce aren't on the list. And instead they get folks from across the country who have experiences that are valuable, but not in their part of the country. And they have to hire from that list. So they hire someone who in their mind is not ideally suited, and probably isn't ideally suited because they have no experience in that part of the country. And it bothers me that Ebony, one of your slides talked about we're 40% minorities, and it bothers me that somewhere in an office, someone is just checking off a box that yes, we've hired this many minorities, but we have not put them in a position to be successful. And if we're doing one without the other, I don't think we're getting the job done. The other thing that came to mind as we talked is USDA and many state agencies, state conservation agencies today are really putting a greater focus on urban agriculture. And I think that's a place where we don't have enough technical assistance in our workforce. It's certainly an opportunity for more minority participation, although at the same time, I don't want to see our minority planners being pigeonholed into just an urban arena, but it may be a place where they can break into the system and then and then transfer to other opportunities. But the Ebony's and Kim, I'd love your comments on those comments, if you don't mind.
Ebony W., go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was gonna see if the other panelists wanted to jump in. Flat and definitely want to monopolize the time, but I think that you're a spot on in terms of that recruitment. I think, you know, I don't know how the government at the largest scale began to look at their policies, but I think that's one of the things as we talk about why we do the things that we do and the fact that they're not yielding, actually going against the exact executive order, or it's not yielding the results that our orders are put in place to yield. I think it's time to examine how do we get there, and how are these lists being determined. And I think it's also looking at those complementary programs like the one that Manners hosts, like the one that Green and Youth hosts, that offer those internship programs for those underserved students and professionals to kind of get that additional training and then be able to go into these roles on a non-competitive hiring authority or some other way that kind of helps them jump ahead of the line. That's definitely not the solution, but that can be a solution in the process. But I think it's, Mike, to your point, how do we start looking through examining our internal policy practices on how those lists are determined, and then on the other end of the spectrum, working with those other organizations and universities to make sure that those students have those skills, interviewing skills and others that they need to make sure that their applications and they make it to that next round of the process.
Thanks, Kim. Go next, please.
Well, I'm going to kind of go outside of my current role a bit and bring in what my professional role is, and give you a little my thoughts here. So in addition to my role with NACD, professionally, I serve as the state FFA advisor in Massachusetts. And so all agricultural education students are part of our organization here in the state. And so with that hat on, I would say you need to look at where you're doing your recruitment as well. You know, I work with high school age students, and as Ebony Preston said, and I know Manners, you know, has high school age students as well. Start young. These students need to know that these types of careers are a possibility for them. If you're not targeting students until they're already enrolled in a collegiate program and in a specific program around the country, well, have you missed an opportunity for students as they're doing career exploration at the high school level to say, a career in conservation? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. You know, this is for me. So, you know, outreach and education programs, yes, you know, of course you want to, you're targeting your constituents, you're targeting, you know, adults in the community, but don't forget about the kids. Get them before, you know, they've set their career path and where they want to be. So outreach with organizations that specialize in youth development. That would be, my suggestion on how to have a more diverse pool. I live in the third most densely populated state in the country, but yet I have, 2,200 students that have an interest in a career in agriculture. Now, where am I going to find them that opportunity? Most of our students are urban or suburban, very, very few rural members in our state. Where do I find opportunity? It's education, it's outreach, that these are career paths that are viable for you. There are entities out there that want you, and there's opportunities for you, right here where you live. So outreach to youth is really, I see as critical, not only for the diversity in our hirings, it's critical for getting a diverse population in our local conservation districts, you know, as the next generation comes in and how they view what their civic responsibility is. We've got a whole generation of people who have a worldly view of how to get involved in the local community, but maybe they're struggling with how to get the actual practice of getting involved locally. So don't forget the kids.
Kim, to that theme, didn't you just have a district official that was a fairly young person that came on one of our district boards? I mean, there are 3,000 of them across the nation, but talk to that story.
Yes, as a young man from Kentucky, I recall, wanted to serve in an elected capacity in some form, and found that he was, I recall, I believe he's 16, pretty young. Oh, thank you, Paulette. Yeah, so he's elected at 17. And this young man he's a passion for service. You know, we had an opportunity to hear from him at our NACD annual meeting. But this is a young person who said, I want to serve my community. And the local conservation district gave him that opportunity because he met the age requirement, got on the ballot and got himself elected. So, you know, how do we, again, outreach and engagement, you know, to students to serve on our local boards, to select career paths, you know, in conservation. They just need to know that it's an opportunity and a possibility for them.
Thanks, Kim. Listen, we're headed right up to our stopping time, and I want to give our panelists the opportunity to say that one last thing that they wish they would have said during their presentation, but they forgot to. So let me go back, and I'm going to go to Ebony P first. And any last thing, Ebony P, that you want to tell the group?
Yeah, just two quick things. I guess on just to echo what Kim was saying on that last point, but that when youth really step up and want to take those leadership positions and have that passion, don't suppress that. But then on the other part, when talking about community organizations and universities and whatever that looks like, engage those partners at step 0. Don't make the plan and have it all figured out and then introduce them to the conversation. Start early, and you'll see a big difference there in what that long.
Thank you so much, Kimberly P, and thanks for your presentation today. Kim Lafleur, how about your last note? The one thing you wanted to tell the folks that you forgot to.
Well, I believe I already mentioned it, but I believe in it wholeheartedly, so I'm just going to end on this note. It's just have the conversation. Get the conversation going. It's the most important thing.
And Ebony Weber, your last notes for the group today.
Well, seeming that we're right at time, thank you all so much for showing up today for this important conversation. I know you could have spent your time doing anything else, but you're here with us, so we appreciate that. You can find Manners on any of your social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at National Manners. And then I would just end with the golden rule, which I think we've now upgraded to the diamond rule. But as one used to say, treat others the way you want to be treated, but we want to go a step further and say, treat others the way that they would like to be treated. And so if you take that with you, then I know you will be successful in your work.
Thank you, Ebony, and thank you for your presentation today and being with us. You know, many of you entered that organization that you're going to go talk with, or the individual. Be bold, be the individual that's a change agent. One of you said the Kentucky State University, a local 1890 university, the Society for Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, Native Americans in Science is actually that acronym we had earlier. The Intertribal Agriculture Council, and one of the individuals is going to go visit with. The Native Tribal Colleges are going to be somebody that somebody goes to. The Scott County, Kentucky elected official we mentioned. All right. Thanks so much. And it's my pleasure to reintroduce, for closing comments, Mike Brown, National Association of State Conservation Agencies Executive Director. Mike.
Ray, thanks so much. First, I want to thank you for your moderating skills. Great job today, as always. Our speakers, thank you so much, and everyone who's still on with us. save a kind thought or prayer for Gary. We hope everything's okay with him. Sorry he couldn't be with us this morning. But speakers, great job. Honestly, I could sit and talk about this all day long with you. I'll probably get the opportunity to do that with Kim sometime this weekend in Chicago. But one thing I did want to point out is, as folks were entering in the chat early on, I saw Jeremy Peters, CEO of NACD, was on with us. And I will tell you, this entire partnership is very dedicated to this effort. And as Kim mentioned in her comments, this is not nowhere near the end of this. This is the beginning. You've got my contact information up on the screen. If there's anything more on this topic, or if there are other topics you would like to see us concentrate on in future webinars, please let me know. Love to hear your comments. Ray, with that, I turn it back to you to close us out.
Well, thanks so much, Mike. Again, add my appreciation to all of you that joined us today. Be the change agent. Write down who you're going to go see, and better yet, go and see them, and use those tips and techniques and whatnot we've gained from our panelists today.